Welcome to the 25th Hour podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Crilly Malice. This is the podcast where successful business owners make sure that they get the most things done and they share how they do that. Today's guest is Paul Fenner. He is a financial advisor and owns TAMMA Capital, and you're going to love his story. I appreciated that Paul was open and honest about things he's done that have worked and things he's tried that haven't exactly worked and things that he's still in process of tweaking to make them work. Sit back and enjoy the conversation with Paul. Welcome, Paul, to the 25th Hour podcast. Super excited that you're here today.
Hi, Lisa. It's great to be with you today. I'm excited about our conversation.
Yes. So, time. We know that time is that one resource that we can't get back. And we also know that it's so easy at the end of the day, and I myself is included, to be like, where'd it go? Like, where did my day go? How did that happen? So what are some of the things, Paul, that you do that help you stay more in control of your day?
Well, it's a fascinating topic and one that I live every day. And as this conversation goes on, we'll learn more about me and my unique situation with my set of triplets plus one. But when I found out where I was having triplets, somebody told me to be careful. The days are long and the years are short. And it's the truest truism I've ever heard. And it so applies to our family, because my wife and I, Teresa, we have literally been taking things one day at a time. And now we're, almost 10 and a half years into this, set of triplets, and then our plus one 8-year-old as well. So we really try as hard as we can to be on the same page when it comes to schedules and timing, especially with active kids. And we try and we fail, and we try and we fail. And it's just we keep trying different things. And we're still trying to figure out what best technology we use, because I'm a Microsoft person and she uses other things. And so that's one thing we haven't figured out, is the whole calendar system. But years ago, I became a big fan of Cal Newport, his book, Deep Work.
Yes.
This whole idea of time blocking. And I'm actually in the middle of reading another book called Indistractable by I knew I was supposed to write his name down, but I'll find it.
I'll find it and put it in the show notes, because I have not heard of that one.
But he talks about it too. But really, like, Cal Newport is the man when it comes to this whole time blocking. And so I started doing that probably about a couple years ago, where I try to set my schedule for the following week and compare how I'm doing to it. And this is mostly focused on my business, not my personal. So, but there's like a whole nother calendar that Teresa and I have to kind of try to keep. And usually it's a whiteboard system. It's our communication system or center in our house, where we come in and out of the garage door. So it's visible and we look at it. But that's kind of in a nutshell of what I do. And I take a lot of notes. So I utilize Microsoft OneNote, and then I still use Evernote as well. But typically what I try to do is plan a week ahead, and then break that down into the day and list out, okay, these are the things I need to do, or my meetings, and then make sure that I block that time on my calendar. I try to get really specific. Like, if I'm working on a client case, I book that. Or if I'm working on portfolio management, I name that time on my calendar and block it out, so that I'm trying to make sure I work within the confines of that time and really protect my schedule. And as I still feel like I do a horrible job at it. And that's one of the things I'm going to be working on this weekend, is kind of trying to reconfigure a few things I've learned from Cal over the last few weeks in this new book that I've read, Indistractable, as well. But that's been really key for me in trying to manage, a growing business. My wife, Teresa, has a demanding career. She works for Lazy Boy as their brand manager. So she handles a lot of their advertising and marketing. And then, like I said, we have this set of 10-year-old triplets and an 8-year-old.
Right. Oh, and let's not forget, you're also homeschooling again starting today.
Yeah, so we live in Metro Detroit, Michigan. So as it currently is today in mid-April, we are the COVID hotspot in the country, and no one can figure out why. But we were face to face with our kids for the last, well, actually since mid-December, and this is the first time our school's gotten shut down for COVID. So we are now back quarantining in virtual school for the next, hopefully only 14 days.
Yeah, I know. Fingers crossed on that. So let's go back to the time blocking stuff. So Cal Newport, huge fan. Love that book. I think all his books I may have read. So I think I love them all.
He's got like he's a writing machine.
I know.
And he just came out with a new one about email, because he's big on like crushing email.
Yes. And so that one I have not seen. So when we're talking time blocking, so I'm going to give you an either or, and you're allowed to choose none of the above and give your own answer. Okay. But are you blocking out specific times each day ahead of time for certain activities? Or are you then taking the appointments where they fall and blocking the time that is not appointment centered and assigning the task into that? Or is there a combination of what I've just said that is what you're saying?
I was just going to say it's a combination of both, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I still struggle to a certain degree. So I will set up my calendar to where everything is time blocked for the next week. And it's a good and a bad. So I could have somebody come onto my website or a referral call or shoot me a meeting invite, because I use Calendly. And so somebody will just book time on my calendar when I was supposed to be working on, say, portfolio management or marketing or some other business aspect. And so to me, that either potential client meeting or existing family that I work with, they take priority. So if they schedule a 11 o'clock meeting with me today, and I was supposed to be working on, say, portfolio management, well, portfolio management is getting kicked to the curb, and I'm making sure I take that meeting. So from that standpoint, I do try to, my task on a weekly basis of what I want to get done, I do block that time. But as I mentioned, it can get overridden by a potential family that wants to meet, or an existing family that needs to talk to me about something.
Yes. So I will give a suggestion on the episode. And I'll reference this in the show notes for those of you listening, that will air a couple before yours. She uses there's a setting in Calendly that allows someone to pick 2 or 3 options, and for you to choose the one that best fits your schedule. And
okay, I did not know that.
I forget exactly what that's called. And when you go into Calendly and you're like, that's not there. It was a different calendar system. But I'm 99% sure it was Calendly. And that's on, I'm writing this down so I don't forget to put it in the show notes. It's one of my ways to stay. I'm sorry? Is
that a new feature? Because I know that they've been adding a lot of new things and integrating with, all the various platforms. They've had one with Zoom, but they didn't have one for the longest time with Teams.
Right. And I am not sure. I use Acuity, and so
okay.
It may or may not be in there, but it allows you the ability to approve. So I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
Something about approved times. And so it's not on your calendar until you say yes.
Okay.
And so that may give you a little flexibility. It's in, and so for those of you listening, wondering, it'll be in the show notes. It's Cameo Roberson's episode. So there is a potential helpful solution, but as you're talking about, you're thinking, okay, this weekend, I'm going to think through how to do it a little differently. What are some of the thoughts percolating in your head right now that may or may not come to fruition once you have time to really think it through?
Well, the other thing when it comes to time that I hadn't mentioned yet is I think it was the beginning of last year. So beginning of 2020, I needed to really, like I tell my clients when we're trying to figure out cash flow or planning or whatever it may be, like we need to figure out what the starting point is. And what I mean by that is I was spending all this time all over, but I couldn't necessarily pinpoint where I was spending it. So I got real aggressive about tracking my time. As anal as that sounds, it's really critical, because if you don't know, how can you fix the problem? Just like with my family office clients, if they have a goal, a savings goal they want to hit, but they're not seeing the money go into their account or whatever, well, we've got a gap there. And if we don't understand where the starting point is, how are we ever going to fix the gap? So with me, the starting point was like, I had to get better at tracking my time. So I use a software called, I think it's called Clockify.
Yep.
And so I'm able to break that down into various projects, tag what families I'm working with on a specific project. All of my big rocks that I use. I'm a big Gino Wickman fan, Traction, the book. So I started using that 3 years ago. Talk about another monumental shift. That was huge. I don't think I'd be where I'm at today. I think from a sanity and a business standpoint without that kind of structure. So, I utilize Clockify to pinpoint where I'm spending all my time with. So by having this time block, laid out in my Microsoft calendar, I can tell, or I can see visually, I can go back in previous weeks and say, okay, I was supposed to be working on a podcast episode, but I ended up having to work on portfolio management because the markets went crazy that day. So I'm trying to figure out how to get more realistic with my time block schedule, and then make it more realistic. So I'm not trying to give this like big block to, working on marketing or working on something else, when 9 times out of 10, it never happens. So it just means if I need to make that happen, I need to figure out another time slot to get it booked into to make it work.
Right. And so I want to flip back for a second to when you're talking about tracking your time. Did you find anything, I'm going to say, like, was there an aha moment or I didn't know that, as you were tracking your time?
I think the biggest surprise to me, and I knew I was spending a lot of time on what I would call admin or email. That was a bigger number than I had anticipated. Where I wanted to spend more time, which for me is always working with my current families or working with potential families, I wasn't giving that enough time. And so that was one of the, when I put my plan together for 2021, that was a very adamant point that I wanted to change, where I wanted to shift that time where I'm working more with my families, both currently or, people that are interested in working with us, and have more time spent with them. Because that's one of the things I've struggled with as far as like growing my firm. The majority of my families, when I say majority, I work with about 52 families right now. 80% of them have come to me through either knowing me personally or a referral from an existing client. And then I have friends that actually know what I do that send people to me. So, it ends up being like 95% is through some kind of word of mouth network. And it's not necessarily from social media. I don't do like advertising per se, but when I put those things all together, that's another reason why, if I pour into my families, if I'm top of mind to them, if I'm giving them more touch points, they're going to have more conversations with other people.
Right. Absolutely. How did you lessen the time that you were spending on the admin? Because what I didn't hear you say, Paul, was I noticed I was spending a lot of time on admin, and I noticed I wanted to put more time in with family. So I decided to work an extra 15 hours a week to make that happen.
A lot of times, Lisa, that's what I'm doing. I'm actually working more hours than I should or would like. But given like where we're at in a growth
Mm-hmm.
standpoint with TAMMA, it's just something I have to take on. And actually one of my rocks this year is, and I get this question often, is, well, how many more families can you take on? And realistically, I can double where I'm at today, but there's things that are going to change. And I get that question, well, how are you possibly going to double or can double without adding, another advisor or somebody like that? And I'm like, I have really good processes and workflows that are behind the scenes, that are in my back
Mm-hmm.
office, where I can support additional people or additional families. But what that does mean is that I don't have to keep grinding on the marketing machine, if you will, and really focus on what it is that I really want to do. So like in my situation, I love doing my emotional balance sheet podcast. That's been great. It's growing. I've had a lot of good feedback. So I think that'll always be a cornerstone for me from a branding of TAMMA, if you will. But with the size of my family office base, they're having conversations with other people. It's that whole snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Absolutely.
why a lot of advisors really struggle their first 3 years in this industry, because it's so hard to push that rock up the hill. But then once you get it there, then you don't have to crank on every lever to drive growth, because if you're doing a good enough job in servicing your families, your clients, then they're going to be your best, sounding board or bullhorn, if you will.
Right. Well, it's exponential growth. I was just listening to one of my favorite podcasts to listen to is Mike McAllowitz's podcast on I think is now called Mike All Up in Your Biz is what it's
Okay.
called now. He just rebranded. He had, and I cannot remember who his guest was, but they talked about how you'll lay out your 5-year plan and you think it's 20% year one, 20% year two, etc. But it's not. It's
No.
like 85% years 1 through 4. And then, or I mean, you're getting 15% years 1 through 4, and then 85% is coming that last year because it's just that exponential growth. And so you're laying the groundwork right now with your 52 families, and they're talking and talking and talking until it'll be, I don't want to say easy to double, because I mean, you've put it, it's that overnight success that took 20 years to get to.
Right. Exactly. And, I have this love-hate relationship with social media, which is funny because that's what, Teresa does in her career is social media and advertising and marketing. And, again, it just goes back to my best marketing are my current families,
Mhm.
and they're great. They have conversations, and, it's not me asking for them. It just happens naturally. And that's the best kind of relationship to have, because with my families, they've been with me for a long time. I started the firm 10 years and 1/4 ago, the day my triplets were born. And so, I have relationships that go back that far, and then I have new relationships. And what's really been interesting this year are all the new, I call them legacy kids. So they're the sons and daughters of parents that are now coming on board to TAMMA. So they're finishing college or starting their careers, and they want to get going as well with planning their financial futures and having a wealth management plan, and all those things that come with that, and that support and that sense of family, because they've seen me at in their living rooms or in their kitchen tables, talking with mom and dad about finances and wealth planning. And usually when I come on board with a family, there's often a stipulation, if they have kids, like, you're going to be working with my kids at some point soon, right? Because they won't listen to me, but more likely they'll listen to you. So
Right.
it's been really an honor and a privilege to be able to see that type of growth and expansion with my client base.
So how did you name your firm?
Oh, so I didn't actually come up with a name. So I'll have to credit my career mentor, one of them, but probably the most influential, of course, is Camille Jane. So my original company, name of my company was DreamWorks Capital Management. And I had that for the first year and a half. And I met Camille, and I was really taken by her. I'm like, man, she's somebody that could really help me build the foundation, because it was really early on in the company, and take it somewhere. And so the first thing she said to me when I got introduced is, you have to change the name of your company. And I just like got it all launched and off the ground. And I'm like, it was like kind of devastated. But the long and short of it is that she came up with a name, TAMMA, which represents my family, which coincides to the fact that I primarily work with families. So TAMMA is my wife, Teresa, Aiden, Madison, Mackenzie, and Andrew. So it's my wife's first initial, and then the first initial of all my 4 kids, my triplets plus 1. And that's how you get TAMMA. And it's really easy to talk about what I do, who I do it for, and why I do it. Obviously the famous book by Simon Sinek is
Why?
Know why.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people can sense that from me and understand, like I can empathize and understand what people are going through with families that are trying to balance multiple and lifestyle and financial priorities, saving for retirement, saving for college, just trying to keep up with cost of living and, all the kids' activities today, which is, a lot of subjects I get into that most people think, well, why would my advisor ever bring that up? Well, it's because you cannot separate your financial life from your emotional life or your lifestyle. The two are completely interconnected. And a lot of the, financial decisions we make are some of the most emotional decisions we'll ever make, like buying a house, where our kids go to college, do our kids go to private school versus public school? And, even in careers, because before I started TAMMA, I had a 25 year corporate career in accounting, finance, tax, and operations. So my last corporate role, I was CFO of a private equity company. And then prior to that, I was actually director of finance at Lazy Boy as well, where my wife works. And so I know what it's like to have a very demanding career and, kind of be that type A personality where a lot of us are defined, or we identify with our career. And so sometimes that goes well and sometimes it doesn't. I work with a lot of people that are that go through a career transition, whether it's something they wanted to do or was forced upon them. So there's so much more that goes into what I do besides numbers that most people don't know about.
Right. Absolutely. And was there a deciding moment that had you to say, I want my own company?
So I always knew that when I would go into wealth planning or financial services, that I would have my own firm. Early on, back in the early days of my corporate career, like I had interviewed with the, Merrill Lynch's, Edward Jones, Raymond James of the world. And I just didn't like that environment. Like I wanted to call my own shots. I wanted to be my own boss. And given that I had this experience of running, multi-million, sometimes $100 million, companies or divisions of companies, like I felt pretty confident I could do that. And so really the tipping point that led me into TAMMA on a full-time basis was our own family situation. Teresa was working full-time, demanding career. I had this corporate career while I was still trying to build and grow TAMMA. And our kids, I think the triplets were about 3 or 4 at the time. And Mackenzie would have been 2 or so. And we could tell that our family was going in a not good direction. We were all kind of coming off the rails. And we decided that in order to make this work, one of us was going to have to take a more hands-on approach to being at home. And so Teresa, her demanding career, I'm like, we needed that. And she was covering our insurance at the time. But then I had if I went with TAMMA, I had the flexibility to, structure my work week around being home by a certain time to be able to get them off the bus or get them to school. We obviously had help, when they were toddlers growing up. And so making sure I was home to be able to be more involved. And, looking back at it, that was one of the best decisions that we had ever made for our family. But I'll be fully transparent with you. I was scared blankless because I wasn't, I had a good base of families that I was working with, but, I'm naturally a little bit risk adverse. So just, making that leap was going to be challenging. But, when I look back at it over the last 3.5 years since we made that decision, the growth in TAMMA has been just exponentially. And, it's hard when I'm working with or having a conversation with somebody that just got let go of their job. And I've been through that situation before as well. That's, I think, another reason why I can empathize and understand with people going through that, is that it's hard to look somebody in the eyes and say, you know what, this might be one of the best things that ever happened to you when you're going through something as crappy as that is. But, 9.5 times out of 10, a year later, that person is in such a better position. And that's exactly what happened to not just me, but to all of us, Teresa and our entire family.
Right. As you're talking about taking that leap, like I think back when I took my leap 7 years ago, and it was like, all right, we're going to do it. And
Yeah.
similarly to your story, I was like, okay, my husband carries the insurance. So I can, at least that piece is, but there's still that whole, oh my gosh, that mentality of, you have to, like they always say, kill what you eat,
Yes.
which is I hate that
Yeah.
phrase. Hate it, hate it, hate it. However, you're like, just because you open a website doesn't mean they're all going to come flooding in. Like you have to, there's things you have to do and it's more about, like you're very good at your skill set. I'm very good at my skill set. It doesn't mean that we're great business owners. It
Well,
means we're great technicians who have opted to start a business. And then what? And it's scary at first.
yeah. And if you go back to like how I've explained, like my background, accounting, finance, tax, operations, nothing in there says anything about sales or business development or
Right?
marketing.
Or
And
marketing, right?
yeah. And so, and even with like Teresa has nothing to do with the business. We keep a major firewall between her and the business because we have a lot of there's a lot of families that I work with that are close personal friends of ours.
Mhm.
And it's very important that people realize that, Teresa doesn't have anything to do with the business. There's from a fiduciary standpoint, like
Right.
I am here to take care of you and your family. There's nothing from a financial standpoint that gets out. And it's interesting that the area that I live in, there are people that will work with me because I'm their neighbor, because there's that, I guess, additional level of trust
Right.
or factor that you consider. But just the opposite. There's people in my subdivision that won't work with me because it's like, oh, that's too close. It's too close. We're good friends. And I just don't know, like, if something ever happened, I'm like, well, if something ever happened to your portfolio, guess what? It's going to happen in my portfolio because the investments or the strategies that you're involved in, those are the same ones that I'm involved in. Those are the same stocks that I'm buying for my own retirement that I'm putting in my kids' 529 plans. And so that's another really, I think, unique difference in working with a independent RIA like myself, is that I would never put somebody in a position or buy an asset for them that I wouldn't feel comfortable owning myself. So because I may be, more risk adverse than somebody else, maybe I own 3% of Apple and somebody owns 4% in their portfolio, but we all own Apple. I make sure that I have a vested interest in owning all the same positions that my families do. So we're tied at the hip, so to speak, when it
Right.
comes to that.
Absolutely. And for those who are listening who are not familiar with the difference between an RIA and I don't want to say more traditional, but a non-RIA, let's do it that way. Can you bottom line it, the difference between the two models?
Yeah. So there's this word called fiduciary, and most people don't probably realize what it is. But think of it in this way, like that Hippocratic oath that doctors take, like they have to do what's in your, better on your better part. That's the same thing with what a fiduciary is. It means I have to do what's in the best interest of Lisa, not what's in the best interest of TAMMA Capital or Paul Fenner. And so I take that very seriously. Now, I would do that whether the government required me to do that or not. But because I'm a registered investment advisor here in the state of Michigan, but I practice nationwide. I have clients all over the country. And I'm also a certified financial planner, which also requires me to be a fiduciary. So it doesn't make me a better or worse advisor, like I tell people, but it does require me to take a lot of tests, a lot of continuing education, and fill out a lot of paperwork with the government agencies every year. And it should give people a sense that they're working with a professional, because anybody could go out there and call themselves a financial planner, a financial advisor, wealth planner, wealth advisor. There's like probably a dozen different names that people refer to us in this industry. But I was just having this conversation with a new family, and the husband's totally on board, and the wife's like, well, I don't know, how do we know he's not a scam or he's going to steal all of our money? And I just point blank, going back to how I named my company, I would never tarnish my family's name like that. It's not worth me like spreading gossip about somebody's personal situation that could totally collapse my own livelihood. It's just not something I would do. And those are those stereotypes that real good financial advisors still face on a daily basis. Because listen, there's no shortage of people trying to separate you from your assets. Bernie Madoff, there'll be another one and another one after that. And so it's a constant battle, fighting some of these stereotypes out there in the industry.
Well, and I feel the very similar way around coaching. Anyone can be a coach. Like, ever. I called myself a coach before I realized what a coach actually was. Then I went to school and took it immediately, that word, off my website until I could go through the certification process and then the continuing ed. I feel like in an industry, it's important to look for how is it regulated?
Yes.
And who are the people who have opted to go above the bar? And again, not that there aren't excellent coaches out there who do not have formal training. I just, coming from the world of education, before opening my own business, there's just something about formalizing that piece. So we've talked about how you spend your time, and you were honest. I love how you're like, let me just be transparent with you. Thank you, Paul, for doing that. And we rolled into about like who you serve and what it is you do. Now let's talk about when the stars align, everything works the way you time blocked it, and it worked the way that you had planned it out for the week. And you've been able to create what I like to call the 25th hour, like that extra time in your day. How do you like to spend it?
I've been thinking about this question because I've watched some of your episodes, and I know that this is a big question for you. And to me, a lot of people, I'll spend it here, there, whatever. But to me, I would take that 1 hour and go on a date with Teresa.
Oh.
Whether it's, taking a ride in a car, or going to see a movie, or going to dinner, or someplace quiet, having a drink. Because that's the one thing with our situation, with her career, the business, TAMMA, the 4 kids, we really don't have enough time for just the 2 of us. And, again, working with a lot of families and a lot of different family dynamics, guess what? I see it all. I see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, that's where, I kind of I do see people that have these really strong relationships between spouses or partners. It ultimately resolves in less stress, whether it's financial stress, lifestyle stress, family stress. When you and your spouse or partner are on the same page and get to spend that time together, it just creates less stress, and less stress is one of the biggest keys to life.
Yes, I agreed. Absolutely agreed. Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we close out today?
Well, I think I mentioned, I have a podcast as well, the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast. You can find that on our website, tammacapital.com. You can also go there. There's obviously a wealth of information about me, my background, the families that we serve. And then there's also at the top of the header, if you're interested in scheduling a complimentary discovery meeting, where I kind of sit down and learn about your situation, maybe the pain points that you're having. There's no obligations. You can schedule that on our website, and we'd be happy to meet with you.
Fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And just as a reminder, licensed in Michigan, but can work all through the US. So even if you don't live in that state, because in Ohio, we don't even say the word Michigan with the M in it. Paul, just feel free to jump on Paul's website and sign up and have a conversation with him. So thank you again, Paul, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
So what did you think? I would love to know your takeaway from today's episode. Shoot an email over to lisa@impactivestrategies.com and let me know. What are you going to do differently now that you've listened to this episode? Also, exciting time. We are accepting new members into the next cohort for Delegate Like a Pro in 28 days. If you know that your key to getting the important things accomplished each and every day and still having time to live your life is that you need to delegate more effectively and efficiently, great news. You can go to delegatelakeapro.com and register to be in our next group.